Marcus thought he was just fixing a fence post. Karen thought she was protecting her property values. Neither of them knew that buried beneath 3 feet of suburban soil lay the secret that would destroy everything Karen had built and hand Marcus the most devastating revenge of his life. Sometimes karma doesn't just knock. Sometimes it comes with a backhoe and a 20-year-old utility easement that makes millionaires homeless. Marcus Rivera wiped the sweat from his forehead as he surveyed the sagging fence post that separated his modest 2-bedroom ranch from the sprawling estate next door. The cedar post had been leaning for months, victim to the relentless Texas clay that expanded and contracted with each season. Now, after last week's storm, it threatened to take down a 10-foot section of fence with it. "All right, buddy," he muttered to the weathered wood, "time to put you out of your misery." He'd been a landscaper for 15 years before the accident. That crushed his back and forced him into early retirement. The settlement money had been enough to buy this little slice of heaven, or so he'd thought when he'd signed the papers 18 months ago. What the realtor hadn't mentioned was that his neighbor was Karen Blackwood, the self-appointed guardian of Willowbrook Estate's property values. Marcus fired up his compact excavator, a machine he'd bought used from a construction company liquidation. It wasn't much to look at, but it could dig a 3-foot hole in half the time it would take him with a shovel, and his back couldn't handle shovel work anymore. He'd barely broken ground when he saw her marching across her perfectly manicured lawn like a general preparing for battle. Karen Blackwood stood 5'6" in her designer athleisure wear, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail so tight it seemed to lift her eyebrows. She moved with the confidence of someone who'd never heard the word no without finding a way around it. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice carrying that particular pitch that made dogs whimper and homeowners check their insurance policies. "Excuse me, Mr. Rivera." Marcus shut off the excavator and climbed down, his bad back protesting the movement. "Morning, Mrs. Blackwood. Something I can help you with?" "You most certainly can." She stood at the property line, careful not to step onto his grass. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" "Replacing a fence post." He gestured to the obviously failing timber. "Storm damage." With that, she pointed at the excavator as if it were a nuclear weapon. "Do you have permits for that machinery? Do you have permits for the excavation?" Marcus felt his jaw tighten. "It's a fence post, not a swimming pool. I'm digging 3 feet down on my own property." "Your property?" Karen's laugh was sharp. "Enough to cut glass." "Are you absolutely certain about that property line, Mr. Rivera?" "Because I have a recent survey and I'm not entirely convinced you're not encroaching on my land." "Lady, I've got the same survey you do. The fence is 6 inches on my side, just like it's supposed to be." "We'll see about that." She pulled out her phone and began typing furiously. "This is a residential neighborhood with standards, Mr. Rivera. We can't have people operating heavy machinery willy-nilly, disturbing the peace, potentially damaging underground utilities." "It's 10 in the morning on a Saturday," Marcus said, his voice carefully controlled. "And I'm fixing a fence post." "Without permits," Karen repeated, as if the words were a magic spell. "I'm calling the code enforcement office right now." Marcus watched her dial, noting the satisfied smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. In the 18 months since he'd moved in, she'd reported him for letting his grass grow a 1/4 inch too long, for parking his work truck in his own driveway, and for the cardinal sin of hanging his laundry outside instead of using a dryer like a civilized person. "Yes, hello," Karen said into her phone, her voice suddenly sweet as honey. "I'd like to report an unpermitted excavation in progress." "Yes, I'll hold." Marcus started to turn back to his excavator, but her next words stopped him cold. "Oh, and while I have you on the line, I should mention that the property owner has a history of code violations." "Yes, I have documentation. Maintenance issues, unsightly vehicles, general disregard for neighborhood standards." Something snapped inside Marcus. Not the hot, explosive anger that got people arrested, but the cold, calculating fury that got people even. He'd worked construction for 20 years before his accident. He'd seen what happened when rich people thought they could push around working folks. But he'd also learned something Karen Blackwood had never bothered to discover. Every property had secrets, and every secret had a price. "You know what, Mrs. Blackwood," he said quietly. You're absolutely right. I should check the permits. Matter of fact, I should probably check all the permits. Make sure everything's up to code. Something in his tone made her pause in her conversation. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing at all. Just being a responsible neighbor. He climbed back onto his excavator. Take your time with that call. I'll be right here when you're done. Karen finished her conversation and pocketed her phone. Code enforcement will be here within the hour. And if you're not in compliance, I'll deal with it, Marcus said. But since we are talking about compliance, can I ask you something? That beautiful pool house you put in last year, when exactly did you get that electrical inspection completed? The color drained from Karen's face. That's none of your business. Probably not. But code enforcement might find it interesting. Especially if they are already out here checking on permits. He started the excavator's engine. Have a great day, Mrs. Blackwood. As Karen retreated to her house, Marcus began digging. But he wasn't just digging a hole for a fence post anymore. He was digging for something much more valuable, information. And in a neighborhood where million-dollar homes sat on lots carved from old farmland, information was buried as deep as the utility lines that fed them. 45 minutes later, a white pickup truck with code enforcement painted on the side pulled into Marcus's driveway. A tired-looking man in his 50s climbed out, clipboard in hand. Mr. Rivera. I'm Inspector Williams. Got a complaint about unpermitted excavation. Right over here, Marcus said, leading him to the hole. Replacing a fence post. Storm damage. Inspector Williams looked at the hole, looked at the broken post, and sighed. Sir, this is maintenance. You don't need a permit to replace a fence post on your own property. That's what I figured, but my neighbor seemed pretty concerned about it. Marcus gestured toward Karen's house. She mentioned something about disturbing underground utilities. Did you call 811 before you dug? Called Thursday, got it marked. Yesterday. Marcus pointed to the spray-painted lines marking the utility locations. Gas, electric, water, cable, phone. All clear. Inspector Williams made a note on his clipboard. You're good to go, Mr. Rivera. Sorry for the trouble. No trouble at all. Actually, since you're here, could you do me a favor? I'm new to the neighborhood, and I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Are there any permits I should know about? Previous violations, outstanding issues, that sort of thing. On your property? Nothing showing up in the system. What? About the neighborhood in general? My neighbor mentioned something about maintenance issues, and I want to make sure I'm not contributing to any problems. Inspector Williams consulted his tablet. Let me see. Willowbrook Estates. Yeah, we've got a few open cases in this area. Mostly minor stuff, but there's one that's been flagged for follow-up. Oh? Unpermitted electrical work. Pool house installation without proper inspection. We've been trying to get the property owner to schedule a compliance inspection for months. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Anything serious? Could be. When you're talking about electrical work near water features, we don't mess around. If it's not up to code, it's a safety hazard. Could be looking at a red tag situation. Red tag. Property gets marked as unsafe until violations are corrected. No occupancy permitted. Inspector Williams closed his tablet. But that's not your problem, Mr. Rivera. You just worry about that fence post. As the inspector drove away, Marcus stood in his yard, looking across the property line at Karen's estate. The house was a monument to excess, 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a 3-car garage, and that beautiful pool house that had been the crown jewel of her home improvement project. She'd thrown a party when it was finished, invited half the neighborhood to admire her handiwork. What she hadn't done was get it properly inspected. Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he was looking for. Danny Reeves had been his foreman back in the day, before the accident. Now he ran his own electrical contracting business. Danny. It's Marcus Rivera. I need a favor. Yeah, I know it's Saturday. How familiar are you with code enforcement procedures? As he talked, Marcus kept digging. The fence post hole was finished, but the excavator was still running. He'd noticed something when he'd been digging, a slight discoloration in the soil, the kind that suggested previous excavation work. Danny, let me ask you something. If someone installed a pool house without permits, what would they have had to dig for? Depends on the setup. Electrical feed, plumbing if it's got a bathroom, maybe a sump pump if they are dealing with drainage issues. Why? Marcus looked at the perfectly straight line of disturbed soil that ran from K. Danny Reeves arrived 30 minutes later in a truck that had seen better decades, his tool belt hanging loose around his waist and a thermos of coffee in his hand. He'd been Marcus's foreman for 8 years, back when Marcus could still swing a hammer without his spine screaming in protest. Now Danny ran his own electrical contracting business, small but respected, with a reputation for doing things right the first time. Well, Danny said, peering into the hole Marcus had dug. What do we have here? Junction box, buried about 2.5 feet down. No protective covering, conduit runs straight toward the neighbor's pool house. Marcus handed Danny the photos he'd taken. Tell me what you see. Danny studied the images, his expression growing more serious with each swipe. Jesus, Marcus. This is a nightmare. Look at this connection here, they used wire nuts in a buried junction. That's not just wrong, it's dangerous. And this conduit. He zoomed in on one of the photos. This is the cheap stuff. Not rated for direct burial. What's that mean in plain English? It means whoever did this work cut every corner they could find. Water gets into those connections, you're looking at electrocution hazards, fire risks. The whole 9 yards. Danny climbed down into the hole for a closer look. This junction box should be in a weatherproof enclosure, properly sealed, and it should be accessible for inspection. Instead, it's buried like nuclear waste. Marcus felt a cold satisfaction settling in his chest. How bad are we talking? Bad enough that any inspector worth his salt would red tag the whole property until it's fixed. And fixing it? Danny whistled low. They'd have to dig up half the yard, replace all the underground work, bring everything up to code. We are talking maybe $50,000–$60,000. Maybe more. And if they don't fix it? No occupancy permit. House gets condemned. Until the violations are corrected. Danny stood up, brushing dirt off his knees. Who did this work? That's the million-dollar question. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Danny the permits database he'd been researching. Property owner is Karen Blackwood. Pool house was installed 14 months ago. But there's no electrical permit on file. So either she did it herself, which I doubt, or she hired someone who was willing to skip the permit process. Or, Marcus said slowly, she hired someone legitimate and told them to skip the permits to save money. Danny's expression darkened. That's a dangerous game. Good contractors won't touch unpermitted work. Too much liability. So she either found someone desperate enough to take the risk, or what? Or she hired a handyman who claimed he knew what he was doing. Danny shook his head. I've seen it a dozen times. Homeowner wants to save money, finds some guy who says he can do electrical work for half the price. Usually ends with a house fire or someone getting killed. Marcus looked across the property line at Karen's estate. The pool house sat like a jewel in the center of her backyard, its windows gleaming in the afternoon sun. From here, it looked perfect, a testament to good taste and unlimited budget. But underneath, it was a ticking time bomb. Danny, I need you to do something for me. I need you to document everything we found here. Photos, measurements, detailed notes about the code violations. Can you do that? Sure, but why? You thinking about reporting this? Maybe. But first, I want to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Marcus climbed out of the hole and dusted off his hands. How long would it take to get an inspector out here? For something like this. If I made the call as a licensed contractor reporting a safety hazard, probably Monday morning. They take buried electrical violations seriously. Don't make the call yet. I want to try something first. Danny raised an eyebrow. What kind of something? The kind where I give Mrs. Blackwood a chance to be a good neighbor. 2 hours later, Marcus stood on Karen's front porch, freshly showered and holding a manila folder. The house was even more impressive up close: custom stonework, imported tile, a front door that probably cost more than most people's cars. Karen had clearly spared no expense in creating her perfect suburban fortress. She answered the door. In yoga pants and a tank top, her hair still damp from what looked like a post-workout shower. Mr. Rivera. I wasn't expecting you. Sorry to bother you, Mrs. Blackwood. I was hoping we could talk about what happened earlier. What about it? Her tone was guarded, but Marcus caught something else in her voice: nervousness. Well, you were concerned about me digging on my property without proper permits. I wanted to let you know that Inspector Williams confirmed I was in compliance. No permits needed for basic fence maintenance. I see. She started to close the door, but Marcus held up the folder. The thing is, while I was digging, I found something I think you should know about. Something that might affect your property. Karen's hand tightened on the door handle. What kind of something? Electrical work. Buried junction box right on the property line. The inspector seemed pretty concerned about it when I showed him the photos. The color drained from Karen's face. Photos? Standard documentation. You know how it is with code enforcement, they want everything photographed and measured. Marcus kept his voice casual, neighborly. Can I come in? I'd rather discuss this privately. Karen hesitated, then stepped aside. Of course. Come in. The interior of the house was a monument to expensive taste: marble floors, crystal chandeliers, furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. But Marcus noticed the details that money couldn't buy: the slight bow in the hardwood floors that suggested settling, the hairline crack in the plaster near the staircase, the way the front door didn't quite sit flush in its frame. Can I get you something to drink? Karen asked, leading him into a living room that could have housed a small aircraft. I'm fine, thanks. Marcus took a seat on a leather sofa that probably cost more than his truck. Like I said, I wanted to talk to you about what I found. What exactly did you find? Marcus opened the folder and laid out the photos Danny had taken. Karen's face went white as she looked at them. This is electrical work connected to your pool house, Marcus said. It's buried on my property, about 6 inches past the property line. The problem is, it's not up to code. Not even close. I don't understand. The work was done by a professional. Who? Oh. Karen picked up one of the photos with shaking hands. I hired a contractor. He said he was licensed. What was his name? I don't remember. It was over a year ago. You don't remember the name of the contractor who did electrical work on your pool house? Karen set the photo down and looked at him directly. What do you want, Mr. Rivera? I want to be a good neighbor. That's why I'm here instead of letting code enforcement handle it. Code enforcement? The electrical work on your property is a safety hazard. If an inspector sees this, they'll red tag your house until it's fixed. You'd have to move out until the violations are corrected. Karen sank into a chair across from him. How much would that cost? According to my contractor friend, probably $50,000 to $70,000. Maybe more if they find other problems when they start digging. $50,000. Karen's voice was barely a whisper. The thing is, Mrs. Blackwood, I'm not trying to cause you problems. I just want to live peacefully in my house without someone calling code enforcement every time I mow my lawn. I was protecting the neighborhood, you were harassing me. Marcus's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. Every week, it was something new. My grass is too long, my truck is too old, my laundry offends your sensibilities. Today you tried to get me cited for fixing a fence post. Karen looked at the photos again. What are you proposing? I'm proposing that we both try to be better neighbors. I'll keep my property neat and tidy, and you'll stop calling code enforcement every time I breathe wrong. And if I agree to that, then I'll fill in the hole, forget I ever saw that junction box, and we'll both go on with our lives. Karen was quiet for a long moment. Marcus could see her weighing her options, calculating the cost of compliance against the cost of surrender. All right, she said finally. I agree to your terms. Excellent. Marcus stood up and gathered his photos. I'm glad we could work this out like civilized people. He was almost to the door when Karen's voice stopped him. Mr. Rivera. How did you know to look for electrical work? Marcus turned back, his hand on the doorknob. I didn't. I was just digging a hole for a fence post when I found it. Lucky coincidence. Lucky for whom? That remains to be seen. As Marcus walked back to his house, he felt the weight of Karen's stare on his back. He'd given her a chance to be reasonable, to back down from her campaign of harassment. But he'd also documented everything, and Danny's detailed report was safely stored in his filing cabinet. Because Marcus had learned something important in his 20 years of construction work, when dealing with people who thought money made them untouchable, it was always wise to keep a little insurance. And as he looked back at Karen's perfect estate, he wondered what other secrets might be buried in that expensive soil. After all, corner cutting was rarely a one-time offense. If she'd been willing to skip permits on the electrical work, what else had she been willing to skip? That evening, Marcus sat on his back porch with a beer, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. His fence post was fixed, his property was secure. The for sale sign appeared on Karen's lawn 3 days after the news story aired. It was a small, discreet sign from a high-end real estate agency, the kind that specialized in distressed luxury properties. Marcus noticed it while getting his morning paper, along with the moving truck parked in Karen's driveway, but the sign wasn't the only new addition to the neighborhood. A steady stream of official vehicles had been visiting Karen's property since the story broke, more county assessors, building inspectors, and what looked like federal agents in unmarked sedans. The IRS, Marcus realized. When you defraud the county out of hundreds of thousands in property taxes, the federal government tends to take notice. Marcus was watering his front garden when Karen's Range Rover pulled into her driveway. She sat in the driver's seat for a long moment before getting out, moving like someone who'd aged 10 years in 3 days. Her usual designer clothes had been replaced with jeans and a wrinkled blouse, her perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She saw him watching and walked over to the fence line, her steps unsteady. They are taking everything, she said without preamble. Her voice was hoarse, exhausted. The house, the cars, the jewelry. Everything. Marcus turned off his hose. I'm sorry to hear that. No, you're not. You're exactly where you wanted me to be. I wanted you to stop harassing me. I never wanted to destroy your life. Karen laughed, but there was no humor in it. Do you know what the penalty is for tax evasion? Real penalty, not just paying back what you owe. Marcus remained silent. Prison time. They are talking about prison time, Marcus. 3 to 5 years. Her voice cracked. I hired the best tax attorney in the city. You know what he told me? He told me to start packing. Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to defraud the county. I didn't think I was defrauding anyone. I thought I was just bending the rules a little. Everyone does it. Everyone doesn't do it. Most people follow the law. Most people aren't trying to build something beautiful. Most people don't have vision. Marcus studied her face, looking for some sign of genuine remorse, some acknowledgement of responsibility. But all he saw was self-pity and wounded pride. You still don't get it, do you? He said quietly. You think this is about your vision, your beautiful house, your aesthetic standards. But it's not. It's about the fact that you thought the rules didn't apply to you. And you think they do apply to you. You think you're some kind of moral authority. I think I'm someone who pays his taxes, gets his permits, and doesn't call code enforcement on his neighbors for fixing a fence post. Karen's face twisted with rage. You self-righteous bastard. You destroyed my life over a property line dispute. I didn't destroy anything. I just refused to be your victim. Victim. Karen's voice rose to a shriek. You were living in a shitty little house with a broken-down truck and laundry on the line. You were bringing down everyone's property values. And that gave you the right to harass me. I was protecting my investment. By calling code enforcement every time I breathed wrong. By trying to get me cited for basic home maintenance. Karen was crying now, tears of rage and desperation streaming down her face. You don't understand. I put everything into this house. Everything. My divorce settlement, my inheritance, my life savings. This house was supposed to be my fresh start. Built on a foundation of lies. Built on dreams. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I was going to show everyone that I could make it on my own. That I didn't need my ex-husband's money. Or my father's connections. This house was going to be my proof. Proof of what? That I mattered. That I was more than just some rich man's wife. For a moment, Marcus felt something approaching sympathy for her. But then he remembered the months of harassment, the constant phone calls to code enforcement, the way she'd looked at him like he was something she'd scraped off her shoe. You could have mattered without breaking the law, he said. You could have built something beautiful without lying about it. Easy for you to say. You never had to prove yourself to anyone. I prove myself every day. I prove that a working-class guy with a bad back can be a good neighbor. I prove that you don't need money to have dignity. Karen stared at him, her face cycling through emotions, rage, desperation, and something that might have been understanding. I'm sorry, she said finally. I'm sorry I was such a bitch to you. I'm sorry I called code enforcement. I'm sorry I made your life hell. I appreciate that. But I'm not sorry about the house. I'm not sorry I built something beautiful. And I'm not sorry I tried to protect it. Marcus nodded. I understand. Do you? Do you really understand what it's like to lose everything? To have your life's work taken away because of a fucking fence post? I understand what it's like to have someone try to take away your home because your truck is 10 years old and your grass is a quarter inch too long. Karen looked at him for a long moment, then turned and walked back to her house without another word. That evening, Marcus was reading on his back porch when he heard shouting from next door. Through the fence, he could see Karen in her backyard, screaming at someone on her phone. I don't care what the insurance company says. The pool house was struck by lightning. It's a total loss. Marcus put down his book and listened more carefully. No, there's no evidence of electrical problems. The fire marshal's report is wrong. It was lightning. Fire marshal's report. Marcus felt his blood run cold. Fine. Fine, don't cover it. See if I care. I'm losing everything anyway. Karen threw her phone across the yard, where it shattered against a tree. Then she sank to her knees in the middle of her perfect lawn and began to sob. Marcus stood up and walked to the fence. Karen. Are you okay? She looked up at him, her face streaked with tears and mascara. The pool house burned down last night. While I was at the lawyer's office, it just burned down. I'm sorry. I didn't know. The fire marshal says it was an electrical fire. Faulty wiring. The insurance company won't cover it because the electrical work wasn't permitted. Marcus felt the world tilt slightly. The junction box. The buried connections. The corners cut to save money. Was anyone hurt? No, thank God. But the fire department had to evacuate the whole block. They said if the fire had spread to the gas line. She shuddered. People could have died, Marcus. People could have died. Because of my shortcuts. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, Marcus saw genuine remorse in Karen's eyes. Not self-pity, not wounded pride, but actual understanding of what her actions had cost. I could have killed someone, she whispered. My neighbors, their children. All because I was too proud to get proper permits. Marcus climbed over the fence, something he never thought he'd do, and knelt beside her in the grass. "But you didn't," he said quietly. "No one was hurt. That's what matters." The fire marshal gave me a copy of his report. "Do you want to know what it says?" "If you want to tell me." "It says the fire started in an underground junction box. Poor connections, water infiltration, electrical arc. It says the installation was grossly negligent and a tragedy waiting to happen." Marcus closed his eyes. He'd found that junction box 3 weeks ago. If he'd reported it then, if he'd forced the issue instead of using it as leverage, the fire might never have happened. "I'm sorry," he said. Karen looked at him in surprise. "What are you sorry for?" "I knew about the electrical problems. I could have insisted you fix them immediately instead of using them to make a point. You're not responsible for my choices, Marcus. I hired a crooked contractor. I chose to skip the permits. I chose to bury the problems instead of fixing them." She wiped her eyes. "I chose to be a bitch to you instead of a good neighbor." They sat in silence for a moment, two people who had been at war now united by the understanding of what that war had cost. "What will you do now?" Marcus asked. "I don't know. The lawyers say I might avoid prison if I cooperate with the investigation, help them find other cases of unpermitted work. But I'll lose everything. The house, the cars, probably end up in bankruptcy." "Where will you go?" "My sister has a couch in Phoenix. It's not much, but it's a start." Karen stood up and brushed the grass off her jeans. "I want you to know something, Marcus. I want you to know that I understand now. I understand that you didn't destroy my life. I destroyed my own life, and you just refused to let me destroy yours too. I'm glad you understand that. I also want you to know that I'm glad you fought back. I'm glad you didn't let me bully you into submission. Someone needed to stop me before I hurt someone. I wish it hadn't come to this." "I don't," Karen said, and for the first time in weeks, she almost smiled. "I needed to learn this lesson. I needed to understand that actions have consequences, even for people like me." She walked back toward her house, then stopped and turned around. "Marcus, take care of the neighborhood, okay? Don't let anyone else make the mistakes I made." "I will." As Karen disappeared into her house, Marcus looked around at the estate that had been her pride and joy. The pool house was a pile of charred rubble, the perfect lawn was torn up from fire truck treads, and the beautiful home that had cost her everything sat dark and empty. But for the first time since this whole ordeal began, Marcus felt no satisfaction in her downfall. Because he'd learned something too: revenge, even justified revenge, always cost more than you expected to pay, and sometimes the price was almost too high. 6 months later, Marcus stood in his backyard, watching a crew install a new fence between his property and what used to be Karen's estate. The house had been sold at auction to a developer who planned to tear it down and build something more appropriate for the neighborhood. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. Karen's dream home would be erased as if it had never existed. The new fence was exactly 6 inches on his side of the property line, professionally installed with proper permits and inspections. No corners cut, no shortcuts taken, no buried secrets waiting to destroy someone's life. Marcus had testified at Karen's sentencing hearing 3 weeks ago. The judge had been surprisingly lenient: 18 months of house arrest followed by 5 years of probation, plus full restitution to the county. Karen's cooperation with the ongoing investigation into unpermitted construction had helped her avoid prison, but it had also revealed a network of corrupt contractors and compromised inspectors that stretched across 3 counties. "Mr. Rivera." Marcus turned to see Jennifer Chen walking across his yard, tablet in hand as always. She'd become a regular visitor to the neighborhood as the county's investigation expanded. "Ms. Chen, how's the investigation going?" "We've identified 47 properties with similar violations. Total estimated tax loss is approaching $3 million. She looked at the construction crew working on his fence. "I wanted to thank you again. None of this would have been possible without your initial report. I didn't set out to uncover a conspiracy. I just wanted to fix a fence post. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest actions. Jennifer consulted her tablet. I also wanted to let you know that we've completed our review of your property. Everything's in order: permits, taxes, assessments. You're a model citizen, Mr. Rivera. Just trying to follow the rules. After Jennifer left, Marcus walked to his mailbox and found an envelope with no return address. Inside was a postcard from Phoenix, a desert sunset with greetings from the Valley of the Sun printed in faded letters. On the back, in Karen's familiar handwriting, Marcus started a new job at a non-profit that helps people navigate building codes and permits. Trying to make sure no one else makes my mistakes. Thank you for teaching me that actions have consequences. Marcus smiled despite himself. Karen Blackwood, former queen of Willowbrook Estates, was now helping people avoid the very traps she'd fallen into. There was a certain justice in that. His phone rang as he walked back to the house. Danny Reeves. Marcus, you need to turn on Channel 7. They are doing a follow-up story on the Blackwood case. Marcus found the remote and flipped to the local news. The reporter was standing in front of the county courthouse, holding a thick folder of documents. 6 months after the Karen Blackwood tax fraud case broke, county officials say they've uncovered what may be the largest construction fraud scheme in the region's history. The investigation, which began with a single unpermitted electrical connection, has now expanded to include dozens of properties and millions of dollars in unreported improvements. The camera cut to County Assessor Michael Torres. What we've learned is that this wasn't just one homeowner trying to save money on permits. This was a systematic effort by certain contractors to help wealthy clients avoid taxes and inspections. We are talking about structural engineers who falsified reports, electrical contractors who worked without permits, and building inspectors who looked the other way for the right price. The investigation began when a concerned citizen reported safety violations, the reporter continued. That citizen, Marcus Rivera, says he never intended to uncover such widespread corruption. The camera suddenly focused on Marcus's house, and he realized with growing horror that they were about to show his interview from 3 months ago. He'd agreed to talk to the reporter on the condition that they wouldn't identify him by name, but apparently that promise had expired. His own face filled the screen, looking uncomfortable in the harsh television lighting. I just wanted my neighbor to stop harassing me about basic home maintenance. When I found the electrical violations, I thought it was an isolated problem. I never imagined it would lead to all this. The phone started ringing before the story was even finished. Reporters wanting follow-up interviews, lawyers representing other homeowners who'd been caught in the investigation, and neighbors he'd never met wanting to know if he'd reported their properties too. Marcus turned off the phone and sat in his quiet living room, processing what his simple act of revenge had become. Karen was in Arizona, trying to rebuild her life. 47 other homeowners were facing audits, fines, and potential criminal charges. A dozen contractors were under indictment. 3 building inspectors had been arrested. All because he dug a hole to fix a fence post. The doorbell rang, and Marcus opened it to find his across-the-street neighbor, Janet Morrison, holding a casserole dish. I brought you dinner, she said. Figured you might be tired of reporters and phone calls. That's very thoughtful. Come in. Janet was a retired teacher, a widow who'd lived in the neighborhood for 30 years. She'd watched the whole Karen situation unfold from her front window, and she'd been one of the few neighbors to publicly support Marcus during the media circus. You know, she said as they sat in his kitchen, I never liked Karen Blackwood. Too pushy, too concerned with everyone else's business. But I feel sorry for her now. Why? Because I think she learned something valuable, even if it cost her everything. Not everyone gets a chance to truly understand the consequences of their actions. You think 18 months of house arrest was enough? I think 18 months of house arrest, losing her home, and having to start over at 55 with nothing but the clothes on her back was probably enough. Prison wouldn't have taught her anything she didn't already learn. Marcus nodded. He'd struggled with that question himself. Part of him had wanted to see Karen face serious jail time for what she'd put him through. But another part of him, the part that had sat with her in the grass while she cried about nearly killing people, thought that understanding the full weight of her actions might be punishment enough. The question is, Janet continued, what did you learn? Marcus considered that. I learned that revenge is more expensive than you think it's going to be. Expensive how? I set out to stop one person from harassing me. I ended up destroying the lives of dozens of people I'd never met. Some of them probably deserved it, but some of them were just homeowners who trusted the wrong contractor. And you feel responsible for that? I feel complicated about it. Janet smiled. That's how you know you're a good person, Marcus. Bad people don't feel complicated about the consequences of their actions. After Janet left, Marcus walked through his house, checking the locks and turning off the lights. Through his bedroom window, he could see the empty lot where Karen's dream home used to stand. The developers had cleared everything, house, pool house, even the mature trees that had taken decades to grow. In the morning, they'd start digging the foundation for something new. Marcus thought about the junction box that had started it all, now nothing but melted copper buried somewhere in a landfill. Such a small thing to bring down an empire. But that was the thing about foundations, they were only as strong as their weakest point, and Karen had built her empire on lies, shortcuts, and the assumption that rules were for other people. The phone rang one more time before he went to bed. The caller ID showed a Phoenix area code. Marcus. It's Karen. I hope it's okay that I'm calling. It's fine. How are you doing? Better. Good, actually. I saw the news story tonight. I wanted to apologize. For what? For dragging you into the spotlight. I know you never wanted to be the poster boy for the investigation. It's not your fault. I chose to get involved. You chose to protect yourself. I chose to be a bully. Karen's voice was different now, quieter, more thoughtful. I also wanted to tell you something. The job I mentioned in my postcard. It's more than just helping people with permits. What do you mean? I'm working with homeowners who got caught up in the investigation. People who hired contractors they trusted, who thought they were following the rules, who are now facing financial ruin because someone else lied to them. Marcus felt something tight in his chest loosen. That's good work. It's penance, Karen said. I can't undo what I did, but I can try to help the people who are suffering because of it. Because of me. And because of me. No, Marcus. Because of choices. My choices, their contractors' choices. You didn't make anyone break the law. You just refused to let them get away with it. After they hung up, Marcus lay in bed thinking about choices and consequences, about the difference between justice and revenge, about the price of standing up for yourself when someone with more power decides to make you their target. He'd won his war with Karen Blackwood, but the victory felt hollow now. She'd lost everything and found a way to rebuild herself into someone better. He'd kept everything and learned that sometimes the cost of winning was higher than the cost of walking away. But as he drifted off to sleep, Marcus realized that despite everything, the media attention, the guilt, the complicated feelings about what his actions had unleashed, he didn't regret fixing that fence post. He didn't regret standing up to a bully. For 3 weeks, an uneasy peace settled over Willowbrook Estates. Karen stopped her daily surveillance of Marcus's property, no longer appeared at her kitchen window with binoculars when he worked in his yard, and even managed a stiff nod when they passed each other getting their mail. Marcus kept his end of the bargain too, his grass stayed trimmed, his truck stayed in the garage, and his laundry stayed inside. But Marcus hadn't forgotten about the junction box. More importantly, he hadn't forgotten about Karen's reaction when he'd mentioned code enforcement. The way she'd gone pale, the way her hands had shaken, that wasn't just fear of expensive repairs. That was the fear of someone who had more to hide. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when Marcus got his first real break. He'd been researching property records online, a skill he'd picked up during his own house purchase, when he stumbled across something interesting in the county's building permit database. Karen's property had been extensively renovated over the past 5 years. pool installation, pool house construction, kitchen remodel, master bathroom expansion, new HVAC system, nearly $2 million in improvements. But when Marcus cross-referenced the permits with the completed work, the numbers didn't add up. The kitchen remodel permit was for basic cabinet replacement, but the satellite images showed a complete room expansion. The bathroom permit was for fixture updates, but the property tax records showed a square footage increase. The pool house permit was for a simple storage shed, but the structure was clearly a fully equipped guest house with its own electrical and plumbing systems. Marcus printed out the discrepancies and spread them across his kitchen table. Either Karen had been incredibly sloppy with her paperwork, or she'd been systematically lying to the county about the scope of her renovations. He was still studying the documents when his doorbell rang. Through the peephole, he saw a young woman in a business suit, holding a tablet and looking official. "Mr. Rivera. I'm Jennifer Chen from the county assessor's office. I'm conducting a routine property evaluation for the neighborhood. Do you have a few minutes?" Marcus opened the door. "Sure. What kind of evaluation?" "We are updating our records for property tax purposes. There's been some inconsistencies in the area between assessed values and actual improvements." She gestured toward Karen's house. "I understand you've lived here for about 18 months. "That's right. Have you noticed any major construction or renovation work on neighboring properties during that time?" Marcus followed her gaze to Karen's estate. "You mean the Blackwood place?" "I can't discuss specific properties, but yes, that would be the one we are most interested in." "What kind of inconsistencies are we talking about?" Jennifer consulted her tablet. "Well, hypothetically speaking, if a property owner reported a minor kitchen renovation but actually expanded the room by 400 square feet, that would be an inconsistency. Or if they reported installing a storage shed but actually built a fully equipped guest house. Hypothetically speaking, that would be tax fraud." "Hypothetically speaking, yes. It would also be a violation of building codes if the work was done without proper permits." Jennifer looked at Marcus carefully. "Have you observed any construction work that seemed extensive?" Marcus thought about the junction box buried in his yard, about Karen's panic when he'd mentioned code enforcement, about the perfect estate built on a foundation of lies. "You know what? I have observed some things. Would you like to come in for coffee? I think we should talk." An hour later, Jennifer Chen left Marcus's house with a folder full of photographs, property records, and a detailed timeline of construction activity. She also left with something else, the location of an unpermitted electrical junction box that provided direct evidence of undisclosed work. "Mr. Rivera," she said as she walked to her car, "I want to thank you for being such a conscientious neighbor. Citizens like you help us maintain the integrity of our assessment system." "Just doing my civic duty," Marcus replied, but his smile was anything but civic-minded. The next morning, Marcus was replacing a sprinkler head when he saw the white county van pull into Karen's driveway. Two people got out, Jennifer Chen and an older man with a clipboard and a camera. They walked around Karen's house like crime scene investigators, measuring, photographing, and taking notes. Marcus watched from his yard as Karen emerged from her house, her usually perfect hair disheveled, her face pale with panic. She followed the assessors around her property, gesturing frantically, clearly trying to explain something. But Marcus could see from her body language that the conversation wasn't going well. The assessors spent 3 hours at Karen's house. They measured her expanded kitchen, documented her oversized bathroom, and spent considerable time photographing her pool house from every angle. Marcus couldn't hear what they were saying, but he could see Karen becoming more agitated with each passing minute. When they finally left, Karen stood in her driveway for a long moment, staring at their van as it disappeared down the street. Then she looked across the yard at Marcus, her eyes blazing with fury and something else, recognition. She knew. That evening, Marcus was grilling dinner on his back patio when Karen appeared at the fence line. She'd changed into jeans and a sweater, but she still looked like she'd been hit by a truck. "You called them," she said without preamble. "I'm sorry." "The county assessors." "You called them?" Marcus turned a chicken breast and considered his response. "I didn't call anyone, Mrs. Blackwood. But I did answer some questions when they asked. What kind of questions? About construction activity in the neighborhood. About whether I'd observed any major renovations that might affect property values. Karen's hands gripped the fence rail. What did you tell them? The truth. That I'd observed extensive construction work on your property over the past 18 months. Kitchen expansion, bathroom addition, pool house construction, all of it. Well beyond what basic permits would cover. You son of a bitch. Language, Mrs. Blackwood. We are trying to be good neighbors, remember? They are reassessing my property. Do you know what that means? Marcus turned to face her fully. It means your property taxes are going up. Probably by a lot. It means I could owe back taxes for 5 years. It means penalties and interest. It means, her voice cracked. It could mean I lose my house. That's unfortunate. Unfortunate. Karen's voice rose to a shriek. You destroyed my life over a fence post. I didn't destroy anything. I just answered some questions about what I'd observed. If you'd gotten proper permits for your work, none of this would be an issue. You know damn well I couldn't get permits. For everything I wanted to do. The setback requirements, the height restrictions, the architectural review board, they would have denied half my plans. So you decided to do it anyway and hope nobody noticed. I invested $2 million. In this property. I made it beautiful. I increased the value of the entire neighborhood. You broke the law. Karen was quiet for a moment, her chest heaving with anger and desperation. What do you want? I want you to stop harassing me. I want you to be a good neighbor. I want you to follow the same rules everyone else has to follow. And if I do that, you'll what? Make this all go away. Marcus looked at her with something approaching pity. Mrs. Blackwood, I can't make this go away. The county assessors have all the evidence they need. They've documented everything. Even if I wanted to help you now, it's too late. You planned this. From the beginning, you planned this. I planned to fix a fence post. You're the one who decided to turn it into a war. Karen stared at him for a long moment, her face cycling through emotions, rage, desperation, defeat. Finally, she turned and walked back to her house without another word. Marcus finished cooking his dinner and ate it on his patio, watching the sun set over the neighborhood. Karen's house was dark except for a single light in what looked like her home office. Probably calling lawyers, accountants, anyone who might be able to help her out of the hole she dug for herself. But Marcus knew something Karen was probably just beginning to understand. When you built your empire on lies, it only took one person with a shovel to bring it all tumbling down. His phone rang as he was cleaning up his dinner dishes. Danny Reeves. Marcus, you need to see the news. Channel 7, right now. Marcus turned on his television and flipped to the local news. The reporter was standing in front of a house that looked familiar, very familiar. County officials say this is just the beginning of a comprehensive investigation into unpermitted construction in affluent neighborhoods. The homeowner, Karen Blackwood, is accused of systematically underreporting improvements to avoid property taxes, potentially defrauding the county out of hundreds of thousands of dollars over the past 5 years. The camera panned across Karen's estate, lingering on the pool house that had started it all. Officials say the investigation began when a concerned citizen reported safety violations related to unpermitted electrical work. The discovery of one violation led to a comprehensive review of all improvements on the property, revealing what investigators are calling a pattern of deliberate deception. Marcus turned off the television and sat in his quiet living room, processing what he'd just seen. Karen hadn't just been caught, she'd been made an example of. The county was using her case to send